Okay, welcome to the third video in our 2020 Wasatch Wildlife Watch training series. This video, we will be going through the actual camera installations instructions manual. And so this will be the longest video that we have in the series. So it's going to be a lot of me talking out at you. I apologize for that, but it's incredibly important. All of the stuff that we're going to cover is in your camera installations instructions manual, but I highly recommend that you stick it through this video because I'll talk to you about some of the ins and outs and things that I might not cover in the actual manual itself. And so before I get started, I really have got to get a huge shout out to Mary and Sarah from Wild Utah Project. You guys don't get to see kind of the behind the scenes thing as much, but they have been absolutely critical in putting this video series together. You are hearing me talk and all of that, but they are the ones that have really put this together. And so huge shout out to them. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really couldn't do this without you. There's no way this project could run. And so, and then with that, thank you so much to all of you community scientists out there. This project simply would not run with all of you. It takes an army to run this project, and you guys are exactly that. You guys are the best, and so thank you so much. With that, let's just go straight into this because it's a longer video. These are basically notes for you before going into the field, what you should remember before you head out. And this is really important to do before you go into the field. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into the field with not enough equipment ready to go, and I've had to turn back and go home. It's not awesome. Believe me, if you can help it, do not forget any of this stuff. Really make it just something you do every single time before you leave. You go through these steps and make sure you have everything ready to go. First thing should be your trail camera unit. That is going to consist of everything that you see here. Your actual trail camera or your camera trap. It should have batteries in it, SD card, and they should be ready to go. Those settings should be good. Everything should be ready. You should have your security case right here. So there's your batteries, your SD card. All of it goes in the camera. Camera goes in the security case. And then you should have your lock and your key. And that key is what goes to that lock. That key will be on a little wristband. I highly recommend putting that key on your wrist and not taking it off until you get back home. And that includes while you're setting up the camera, because I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten keys at a site, and we're seriously talking had to redo 10-mile hikes just to get back to a camera site because I forgot the keys. So I highly recommend keeping those keys close to the chest as possible. All right, so this is a really important note. We try to do the best job we can of descenting the cameras before they go out. We don't want to bias any estimates of detection probability. We don't want to be basically attracting or repelling any of the species that we see here. And so we want to make sure that we are making our cameras as descented as possible. And so for that, we ask that you do not store your trail camera unit in the same place that you're storing your food when you're going hiking. Those odors can find their way onto the camera trap, and we don't want to bias our results. So it's really simple. Just basically put the camera unit in a pocket that isn't where you're storing your food. A GPS capable device is also something you'll need. You have to take GPS points when you're at the site, or we simply can't use your data. Because if we don't have a location, it really isn't something that we can use. So if you could do all 15 checks beautifully, but if you never take a GPS location, we can't actually use your data, which is just not something you want to run into. With this, you can either have your handheld GPS. I have one of these, or you can use your smartphone. Honestly, I use my smartphone now. I've stopped using my handheld GPS because I like my smartphone better, and I like the app capability that comes with that more so than my expensive handheld GPS. But it's totally up to you. Either one will work. If you're going to use your phone, I highly recommend the Gaia GPS app. It's 100% free, and it does a really good job of mapping out trails, and it provides really nice base maps, and it does a really good job of getting high accuracy GPS coordinates while you're out in the backcountry. If your phone, for whatever reason, doesn't allow Gaia to be downloaded, maybe you have some strange Android or something, there is this backcountry navigator or Topo Maps Plus that can also be downloaded, and they do a pretty good job. I'm not as familiar with them as I am with Gaia, but I hear that really good things about them. I'm going to walk you through Gaia really quick in case you've never done it before. If you want to download it, this would actually be the best time to do it. So we're going to walk through this. So feel free to pause this video at any time if you want to kind of slow it down so that you can go through the downloading process. But basically, you'll find the app in the App Store. You just search Gaia GPS. You start downloading it. Once it's downloaded, you'll open it up, and this is what you'll see. You can either click the Start Exploring and go through their tutorial, or you can just click Skip. If you click Skip, it'll take you to their disclaimer. Go ahead and select I agree. Then it will come to this screen. It'll say, allow Gaia GPS to access your location. Sometimes people get really freaked out when apps try to access your location. However, if Gaia is not able to access your location, it cannot take a GPS fix for you. You have to allow it to access your GPS location if you want it to take your GPS fix. And so I select the only while using this app function, so that we'll only look at where I'm going if I'm going into the mountains to take a GPS location for a camera. All right, then once you do that, it'll take you to your current location. You will not see this little red place mark here. That's why I've zapped it with this red lightning bolt. You will just see this orange arrow. Anyway, when you want to focus on yourself, or you'll notice it might not be focused on you, you can click on this button right here, and then it will acquire your GPS location. It might take a little while, and you can track the progress if you go to Trip. Trip will show you the resolution of the GPS coordinate. It'll also show you the exact location as well. But basically, you'll click on this, and you'll find that it will know where you're at. From there, if you want to take a GPS location, let's say you found the perfect spot for a camera, you'll click on this button, the Add button. That'll open up this right here, where you'll then select Add Waypoint at My Location. That will pull up this screen where you can then choose an icon. I usually just go with this one. And then you'll name your GPS location. I highly recommend naming it the name of your site, just to keep things easy. Just name it the name of your site. And then click the Save button. Once you do that, you'll now notice and see the sun is now illuminated on our red dot here. Now there will actually be a place marker that should theoretically correspond with your orange arrow. And so that means that you've taken an accurate fix. If you then want to access that fix to record your GPS location, which you will need to do for your data sheets, you click on the Saved folder right here. It will pull up all of your saved locations. One of those should be the name of your site. You'll click on that, and in there, it will have the GPS location. It also has the altitude. Feel free to include that if you want. It's actually pretty accurate. I've tested this a couple times. But there is your GPS location. It goes out to 5 decimal places. You'll notice as we go through the data sheets, we require at least 4 decimal places. So this is more than enough. And if it gives you the extra resolution, you might as well record it. So that is how you record a GPS fix. Any questions on that, you can always ask me at another time. And then the last thing you want to take out before going into the field is your actual Fieldwork folder. And your Fieldwork folder should have all of this in red. There should be 9 data sheets, 1 camera installations document that we're going over right now, 1 placard, which actually this might be something that isn't available for 2020 because we have not been able to laminate yet. The place that we laminate at the University of Utah is currently closed. So there is a chance that these won't make it into your placard. The placard won't make it into your folder this year. If that's the case, I'll show you how to record that information because it is vital. And we'll just use the back of your camera installations instructions. But everything else should be in there. Your 9 data sheets, your 3 SD cards, your installations document, your dry erase marker, and your pen. You want to make sure that you have everything you need before you go out. Cannot stress that enough. All right, then these are just some recommendations for hiking equipment. I used to really be strict about having someone accompanying you when you go out to set up your camera. That can be difficult now in the age of COVID-19, where we're trying to practice social distancing. If you have a family member or someone that lives in your household that would like to accompany you, I highly recommend that you do that. You are 99% safer if you go hiking with someone else. And that is not a lie. That is a true number. 99% of accidents that happen to hikers happen to hikers that are hiking alone. So if you want to protect yourself, the best thing you can do is go with someone. But in this day and age, the best thing you can do is go with someone that you already hang out with quite a bit. These other things are just highly recommended. Map, of course, GPS, you will need that, or something that can take a GPS. Extra clothing, never a bad idea, especially in Utah, especially in May. Food and water, first aid kit, headlamp, flashlight, matches, fire starter, knife, multi-use camping tool, sunglasses and sunscreen. That's a big one for me. Water treatment device. I mean, if you got like a life straw or something, you can go ahead and throw that in there. Whistle or something capable of a loud noise, never a bad thing to have. And then really this seems strange, but like a Tupperware device or a general storage device can actually help you out in a pinch. So, potentially having one of those when you go out there is never a bad idea as well. All right, now we're going to talk about locating the best place for each camera trail placement. All right, so when you're out in the field, you will notice that your folder has the GPS locations of all 3 of your rotations. These are randomized locations, and so they no way, shape, or form mean that that's where the camera has to go. When you get to your camera site, you are allowed 100 meters in any direction to find the best spot for your actual camera placement, because that actual GPS location might end up taking you somewhere where it is physically impossible to set up a camera. That happens, and if that happens, like I said, you get 100 meters in each direction. Having said that, that can still make it difficult to find a camera placement. 100 meters comes up pretty quick when you're up on a ridge. So keep that in mind, that some of these cameras are a little more difficult to find spots for than others, and they do require some hiking to get to. All right, the next thing you really want to do is choose a wildlife-friendly site. Once within the vicinity of the predetermined coordinates, you really want to start searching for trails. Wildlife trails are the biggest thing to look for. Wildlife trails are fairly easy. You just look for batted down grass and vegetation that has not been basically maintained as much as a hiking trail. You also want to look for dirt roads, creek banks, any type of path to a water. These are areas where animals regularly go, and so they're areas that are going to be funnels. And that's what we want to look for, is areas that are funneling in all of the activity that's going on in the surrounding area. We're capturing all of it by just surveying one small section. So here's some good examples. This is a good example of a wildlife trail. They set it up perfectly where it's going in the great direction all the way down the camera. And then here's another great setup on a hiking trail. It's looking right down it, and it's got some excellent photos as well. Next thing you want to do is try to determine the travel path. That is actually incredibly important. You want to choose a site where the travel path is limited to the area that the camera trap can photograph. Usually not a huge problem for us, but let me show you what I mean by that. So here is a typical animal travel path where you could see this could be a wildlife trail or maybe a creek bed or something like that. You want to set up the camera so that the field of view is capturing as much of it as possible. And that's best done by positioning it diagonal to the animal path. You'll see that then it captures the entire path, whereas a lot of people might set them up perpendicular to the path. So like if this is a road or something, you set it up on a tree right perpendicular to it. You'll notice that this captures very little of the path and actually makes it very difficult to understand or even detect what animals are there. So this is a good example of a well-placed camera trap where it's on a path of high wildlife activity. In this case, it's a service road. And you'll see that it's going diagonal along that road. Instead of going just perpendicular like this, we're going nice and diagonally across this. This is an example from Florida of a thing not to do. For this particular study, this is what they had to do because they had to get individual scar marks and spot marks from mountain lion because they were trying to distinguish individuals. So they had to get as close as possible to the actual animal. But this is an example of something we don't want to do. NO don't want to do this because this is not maximizing detection probability. We have no idea what's going on behind this cougar. Just like with this one, if we had done that setup, we would have gotten this cougar and totally missed this one. And so this is an example of what not to do. You want to consider the sensor's range and field of view when you set up a camera. The maximum distance that these cameras can detect is 110 feet. That is a lot. And in the Wasatch, you're hardly going to find an area open enough to fully get that 110 feet. So don't worry if you're not focusing on a spot that you think the camera can't reach. I guarantee you the camera will most likely reach it. What you want to do instead is focus on areas that have more than 5 to 10 spaces of detectability. This is more the issue, is finding an area where you can go out more than 5 or 10 spaces from where the camera's at and still have it pick you up. This is where you want to focus on. You want to get way more than this, but this is our minimum. All right, so this is another example. Say you've had 110 feet. This is kind of the direction and the angle of your camera trap. You'd want to focus it right here on this road, and we'd see that both of these guys would be captured in our photo. Next thing you want to do is consider the terrain. The ground under the camera trap needs to be reasonably level. If not, then you have to make sure that the camera is parallel with the ground. That means that if it's on a slope, your camera can't be pointing directly straight. So it can't be perpendicular with your tree, or it can't be directly straight, because then that really weakens the motion detector. You'll see that the beam here hardly goes down far enough to capture a smaller animal like this little guy. Whereas if you angle it down so that it's perpendicular with the ground, that detector can get all the way down and detect that animal with ease. And so that is what we're focusing on, is the camera needs to be parallel with the ground. You just tell yourself parallel with the ground, and you're in good shape. Like I said, it says right here, parallel to the ground to ensure detection. This is good, green smiley face. This is bad, red X. There we go. This is an example of how to angle your camera. Just throw in a stick or two in the back can really make all the difference. And you'll notice that really play around with this. It can take some time to find the right stick and to make sure that you're in the right position. But a well-placed camera from the get-go makes all the difference when it comes to gathering data and not getting too many photos on your camera, especially photos of swaying vegetation. So this can really make all the difference, making sure that your camera's in the right position. Next one is finding a suitable tree. This probably sounds kind of silly, but you want to find a good solid tree to put your camera on. This is a really good example. One where the diameter is roughly the same size as the camera and it's relatively straight. This is actually almost exactly what your camera setup should look like when it's all said and done. The lock goes through this bottom hole in the camera lock case, and then you pull it through here, and then you want to find somewhere for your leftover wire to go so it's not flipping in front of the camera. And then you definitely want to take your keys. Don't leave them in the lock. But basically, you want to find a trunk that is reasonably straight, and you don't want to find one that's super thin. Gamble oak is infamous for being too thin to set up a camera on, and then it will sway in the wind and cause all sorts of problems. That being said, gamble oak, I have set it up on gamble oak plenty of times. You just have to make sure you find the right one that's sturdy enough that isn't going to sway in the wind. Furthermore, if your tree is slanted, the camera will be slanted when you mount it. No matter how hard you try, the camera will be slanted unless you can really jimmy rig it. And I've had to do this before as well, but it can save you a ton of time just by picking a straighter tree as opposed to a slanted tree. Slanted trees cause the camera to be tilted, and when the camera's tilted, if you remember from that photo in the figure I just showed, the detection array comes out as a cone or comes out as a triangle. When you shift that triangle shifts as well, and theoretically leaves a dead zone or basically a blind spot in your camera's detection field of view where animals can walk and it won't be triggered by the camera. So you want your camera to be as straight as possible. You do not want it to be slanted. Finally, you want to fix the camera at knee height. That's as much detail as I'm going to give, because I'm going to show you that knee height is actually pretty dang consistent across people. This is a photo of Yao and Shaq, and this is Photoshopped little Kevin Hart in there. If we check the position of their knee, we see that although he's about twice or half the size of Yao Ming, their knees are roughly in the same position. So if you set up your camera literally on your knee or at knee height, that is the perfect height for us. And that little bit of variation really comes out in the wash when you have 234 cameras. All right, so now we're gonna go through step-by-step field instructions so that when you're out in the field, you know exactly how to set up your camera. All right, so some step-by-step camera placement and installation instructions. So, like we've said, time and time again, you want to choose the location that maximizes the probability of detecting wildlife. You have 100 meters on all sides to find a camera placement, and within those 100 meters, you want to find the placement that best concentrates wildlife to your area. You want to think while you're out there that 100-meter circle, you want to see what's going on in that entire 100-meter radius circle by just focusing on one spot. So you want to find a place that funnels all of that activity into one location. You really want to focus on service roads, wildlife trails, hiking trails, waterways. Those are your best options. Here are some really good ones. This is focused on a stream bed down in, I think, Mill Creek Canyon. And this is in Red Butte Canyon on a wildlife trail. And you can see that the direction of wildlife traffic is right, just funneling right into that camera. Here's some really good examples as well. Diagonal across the hiking trail, and we pick up this coyote. Diagonal across this service road, and we get these two mountain lion right here. Next thing you want to do, find the straightest tree as possible. Like I said, at least 6 inches in diameter, and you want it to be roughly 5 to 20 feet back from your area of interest. So what that means is basically you don't want it to be right on the hiking trail. Put it a little bit off of it, because that actually maximizes the sensitivity of those sensors. Like if you remember that figure again that I showed you before, if it comes out as a cone, if you put it right in front of it, you're only getting a very small section of that cone that's actually being used to detect things. Whereas if it's about 2 meters away or 5 to 20 feet away, then it has that full range of the detection cone to pick up anything that's walking by. So you just want to make it basically far enough away that you get that that full sensors field of view where you're setting up your camera. Once again, let's just go over this. You want to position it diagonal to the animal's travel path, not perpendicular, and you want to give it some distance from there to the path and not directly on it like this guy. So roughly, once again, roughly 2 meters to that main spot that you're focusing on. This is not recommended. Definitely not 2 meters, and it's perpendicular to our travel path. All right, the next thing you want to do is set the stage, or that's what we call it, is setting the stage. Basically, you will come into terrain that hampers your ability to set up a camera, whether it's trees or vegetation or brush. All of that stuff can not only hinder a camera from detecting things, but it can also set off a camera like crazy if it's swaying in the wind or if the sun is shining on the vegetation. All of that can set off the camera and really disrupt the field of view. So occasionally it's totally cool if you clear away brush and vegetation. You want to keep the stage right down here as natural as possible, but clearing vegetation goes a long way to the difference between maybe 100 or 200 photos on your camera versus 30 or 40,000 photos on your camera. And that is no joke. Plenty of people that are listening to this right now can tell you that they've had 30 or 40,000 photos on their camera. So you really want to watch out for that stuff. You really also want to watch out for anything that potentially obstructs the beam and reduces detection ability. This can result in poor quality photographs. It can also make it so that you actually can't detect as far as you thought you could. So really you just want to, like I said, set that stage. Make it so that the area is ready and conducive to pick up whatever wildlife is walking by. All right, next, before you set up the camera, before, probably one of the most important things you'll do, probably the most important thing you'll do, record your GPS locations. Remember to take your fix and record those GPS points before moving on. Without GPS coordinates, we cannot accept your data, and so we need those GPS coordinates. Highly recommend doing it before. It is absolutely critical, and remember to go out to at least the 4th decimal place. All right, next thing you want to do is switch your camera on to the setup position. When you open up your camera, you'll see that there's an on and off and a setup position. You want to go into the setup position and then navigate through the settings using the menu button that you'll find in the opening of your camera. And the settings then should be as follows. You can navigate through a setting using the left and right arrows, and you can change a setting using the up and down arrows. However, when you go to change a setting, you have to click the OK or the set button to actually change it. If you just change to, let's say if you switch from mode to image size and then you change the image size and don't click set, when you go to your next setting, it's going to reset it back to what it was at before. So you have to make sure that you reset or you click OK when you change a setting, or it will not change. Anyway, these are the settings that we are expecting for every camera. These should be set already. I have gone through and done all of the settings and got all of the cameras ready to go. The only time you'll have to change it is if your camera resets to the factory settings whenever you go out. And I can kind of show you how to avoid this, but it does sometimes happen. These are the settings you'll actually have to change. The rest are default. So you want to change the capture number to 3 photos instead of 1 photo. This is actually really important because we want our cameras to take 3 photos every single time it's triggered. And that's to ensure that we get a good photo of the animal so that we can identify it, and we get an idea of what might be going on beyond the initial animal that captured it. A lot of the times one animal will capture or will trigger the camera, and then we won't see what's going on until the 3rd photo and actually notice that there were 2 other ones trailing it. So you want to have that at 3 photos. Camera name is just more for you than it is for me, just making sure that that is set at your site or it's set at your camera number. Either one's okay, and it doesn't really matter to me. Interval is 15 seconds. This is kind of the research accepted interval. This is the time in between one camera trigger and another. So your camera will take its 3 photos and then it will shut off for 15 seconds. That means it completely turns off and it is incapable of taking any photos for 15 seconds. That becomes really important when we start talking about the camera placard. But for now, just you want to make sure that that's at 15 seconds. That's to ensure basically that if like a moose or a deer sits in front of your camera, you don't get 1,000 photos of it before it walks away. The next one is the sensor level. We want that as high as possible. We want to be detecting anything we can. So we want to set that thing as high as we can. And then set clock is if you notice that the date and time have changed, that is how you can access it to change it back. All right. Setup is also where you will perform your walk test for detection distance calculation. I'll show you that on the datasheet where you put that number, but for now, let's walk through how to do the walk test. So this is your camera. When you open it up, this is what you'll see. This is what I was talking about by the off, the setup, and the on switches. You want to switch that to setup. When you switch that to setup, your main menu will turn on here. This is where you'll see the date, the time, and then how many photos the SD card is taken out of how many photos the SD card can hold. You'll also see the battery up here, and so that's how you can check your battery. But you want to check that that date and time is correct. If it's not, go back and set it to the correct time. And remember to click save or click set before you go on to check it again. Anyway, here's to navigate between settings. Here's to change a setting. Use these 2 buttons. And here's to set the new setting. This is how you access your menu. If you have an aggressor camera, which will be a brown one or a camo one, your buttons will be up here, but they correspond to the exact same thing as this one. All right, so to get back to the walk test, when you click it onto setup and you close the camera, you'll notice that this red light will be blinking right here. This light blinks whenever the camera would take a photo. And so that's saying that both the triggers, the heat trigger and the motion trigger, have been set, and that the camera, if it were turned on, would be taking a photo right now. What you want to do for your walk test is, if you're with someone else, they will hold it. If you're not, you want to tie the camera loosely to the tree in the roughly the same position you're going to put it up at. And then you're going to walk diagonally in front of the camera as far out as you possibly can before this dot stops turning on. So once it stops, then you'll know that the camera can no longer detect you, and you'll record those paces back to the camera. That is the number that you will record on your detection distance. So, like I said, you want to go out until the light stops blinking. Once the light stops blinking, you walk back to the camera and you record the amount of paces it took you to get back to that camera. All right. Once you're done that and you've filled out the data sheet and you've done the GPS coordinates, go ahead and switch the camera on. When you switch the camera on, you'll notice that it will blink again for 10 seconds. That's really important. That means that the camera's arming itself. After those 10 seconds, you want to make sure that it turns off, and you shouldn't see anything after that. Because once you turn it on and it blinks for 10 seconds, it's now going to try and be as covert as possible. So it doesn't want you to know that it's taking photos, just like it doesn't want animals to know it's taking photos. So you won't see anything. But if you saw it blinking for 10 seconds before you put it back in the lockbox, that means that the camera's on and you don't have to worry. Once the camera's on, go ahead and mount it to the tree at knee height and ensure that it's pointing as straight as possible. So this is a really good example. I know it's on a fake tree, but it is as straight as possible, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want, because like I said, this is your detection cone right here. If this is thrown off in any way and the cone's going out this way, an animal could easily walk underneath here and never be detected, even though theoretically the camera could see it. All right, remember then, a well-placed twig between the camera trap and the tree can always adjust the angle of what the camera is pointed. You don't have to worry about not using dead wood or stuff. It can be too brittle, but basically use your best judgment when you're placing something underneath that camera. Try to avoid pointing the camera at objects in direct sunlight or large rocks, or waving grass can always be a bad idea. When the sun shines on that waving grass and then that waving grass moves, it's going to trigger the camera like crazy. And also, if the camera's shining into direct sunlight, that weakens the sensors of the camera, because it's already picking up that the heat sensor's constantly being triggered. And so then it only relies on its motion trigger, and that's not as strong of a sensor. And so you do, if you can, want the camera facing either north or south to avoid direct sunlight during sunset and sunrise. But I understand that sometimes you've got to sacrifice that to get the better position. So that should kind of be the last thing that goes through your head. If you can find a camera that's going north or south as opposed to east or west, that's probably the best. Here's just an example of how to put a shimmy stick basically behind the camera to make it parallel to the ground. Highly recommend doing that when you go out, if you're on a slanted ground. If not, you don't have to worry about it. And then check and recheck the camera position. Please, please, please. I cannot tell you enough of how much this will affect you, and this will be positive. Walking, spending that extra 5, even maybe 10 minutes, checking and rechecking the camera to make sure it's in the correct position can go a long way to making sure that you get what you are actually focusing on. Here's an example. This is my wife. I love this photo because we had just spent a really long time clearing down a lot of this grass, and you can tell that she was super happy about it based on her expression here. But this is us setting up this camera, and she can see that I'm supposed to be focusing on her, and I'm clearly not. And so she's simply just telling me to move the camera here. But that is the best way to do it, is have someone else on looking as you're setting up the camera, standing where they're supposed to be, where you're trying to focus your camera, and have them direct you where to set that thing up. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're looking at the camera basically directly at you. Just like with any camera, you want that lens pointing directly at you. And the great thing with a lot of these cameras is that the lens is very reflective. So a lot of the times, if you're looking directly into the camera, you can see kind of a red or blue reflection coming back at you. That's a good indicator that the camera is pointing directly at you. All right, one of the last things you want to do is make sure that you have all your tools and all your gear before you leave the site. Keys are the most commonly misplaced item. I cannot tell you enough. I think I did it maybe 8 or 10 times in 2019, where I left the keys at the site and had to walk all the way up. This could be after 9 hours of working and then just finishing a 10 mile hike, and then realizing that I left the keys back up. Well, you can't leave those keys up there, because then it makes it so that anyone can go and grab them. And so you'd have to run back up and take them back out. So what I've started doing, and I highly recommend that you do this as well, is you'll have your key on a keychain, and that keychain will be wrapped around a bracelet. Keep that bracelet on your hand, and try to keep that bracelet on your hand the entire time that you're working with the camera. Even when it's in the lock itself, keep it on that bracelet and keep that bracelet on your hand. That makes it really easy to not forget those keys. And I can't tell you how easy it is to forget those. All right, then the next thing, as you're leaving the site, and this is as you're leaving the site, you want to show that information placard that I was telling you about. There's a very good chance you won't get the laminated placards this year because of coronavirus. And so instead, what you're going to do is write this stuff out. You can either bring out a notepad, you can bring a pen and paper, you can use the back of your data sheet, whatever you got to do. But what you're going to want to do, and you don't have to worry about the GPS location and the technician, but the date, the site, and the time are critical. So all you have to do is on this sheet of paper or on this notepad, you write the date, you write the site, and you write the time. And then you flash this in front of the camera at about 5 to 6 feet or so for at least 15 seconds. I highly recommend 30 seconds, even up to a minute. And that ensures that the camera will take a photo. And this is our reference photo. So if for whatever reason your date and time is off, and we're at the point where we don't know if we can use your data, if we can find one of these reference photos, we can then retrofit all of the other data, the data from your camera, so that we can still use it. So this is vitally important that you record this information and show this to the camera before you leave the site, so that we can get that photo and we can say, all right, the placard said the technician left at 10 a.m., but their camera's reading 14. We know that camera's 4 hours off. That means all subsequent photos are 4 hours off. That's an easy fix for us. But if we don't have this placard and we're starting to see inconsistencies with the time of day and what it's looking like in your camera, we can't use your data until we can verify it. So really important that you show this to the camera before you leave the site. All right, these are just some final notes on using these cameras. If you notice a blue light when you're setting up your camera, that means that your batteries are critically low and won't last more than a couple hours or so. Highly recommend changing the batteries before you get to this point. But if you see that, and maybe you see that during your check, what's most likely happened is your SD card is filled, and so your camera's been taking photos constantly, and you might want to consider switching your camera to a different location so it doesn't take as many photos, and then definitely switching out those batteries. Make sure that you do not share the images from the camera study on any social media site without permission, especially photos of individuals, vehicles, or human activity. This is illegal and can get us shut down, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to violate anybody's privacy. And so even if it's an animal photo, please share it with me before. I am now technically a National Geographic Explorer, which sounds cool, but really all it means is that I have to share all of this, my media that goes onto social media with National Geographic before I can do anything else with it. And so if you get any wildlife photos that you really want to share on your social media, I highly recommend that you do that. Just send them to me before so I can give you the okay. And that way I can basically talk to National Geographic and they won't get mad at me. All right, never insert or remove a memory card while the camera is on. Always turn it off first. If the camera's on and you take out the SD card, that is the quickest way to reset all of those settings back to the factory stuff. And that is the best way to avoid that happening, is you just have the camera off. So if you don't want to spend your entire 9 weeks resetting your settings every single time you go out, turn that camera off before you switch out the SD card. We're not even going to talk about how to erase a memory card, so just never do it. We need all of that data. When it comes time to look through the camera data, that's a whole other story. But when you're just switching them out, please don't erase the memory card. The rotation 1 memory card should go to rotation 1, and we shouldn't erase it to then put it back for rotation 2, because then we lose all of that data for rotation 1. In wet weather, you want to keep the inside of the camera as dry as possible, just because it is a computer and we don't want it to short circuit. Make sure the rubber seal on the camera is clear of any dirt or debris. That's really for you to avoid any insects going in there. They probably will still find their way in there though. Make sure the camera lens, motion sensor, and LED cover are clean. Just kind of wipe it off if you see that it's dirty or covered in mud. The foliage blowing in the wind can trigger the camera, so try to remove it as best as possible. And then direct sunlight can also trigger the camera and weaken the sensors. And so try to position them out of direct sunlight and facing north and south instead of east or west. All right, so we can't show you these. We would show you these in person. Highly recommend checking out both of these videos. They will help you so much on actually using your camera and setting them up. So this video is how to use a Bushnell camera. It's a very good video. Kind of boring, but very good. And then this is a video about setting up your actual camera. And this is a video from a group in North Carolina. They do a very good job of making these informational videos for citizen scientists. So I highly recommend checking it out. It's a little more entertaining, and it's a lot shorter. All right, last thing, what if you cannot make a setup check or takedown? First off, it is expected that you can complete all setups, checks, and takedowns during the assigned weeks. And that's why we give you a week, is so that you can plan it out as best you can, so that you can make every setup, every check, and every takedown. However, life happens. I totally get that, and I'm 100% available. So if not possible, please contact me as soon as possible, but at least by the Thursday of the designated week. So let's say you can't make your week 5 takedown. Please don't contact me Saturday of week 5 saying that you can't make your takedown, because that makes it really difficult for me to then go down and take that camera down for you, because I'm already doing my own field work and I'm trying to coordinate with all of the other citizen scientists. So if you can at least give me a couple days, I can schedule it so that I will make sure that that gets done for you. All right, with that, that ends this video. Thank you very much. We've got one more to go, and I hope you tune in for it.